Good afternoon and hello to everybody else who might be joining from a live session from a different time zone. Apologies. Yes, there's some work going on in my house. So we're on day 2 with Eat with Sandhya, in case you're wondering where you've landed up, where we're going to be talking over 10 days about 10 lessons around food, and we're going to also have 10 meals together. So just to recap, yesterday we talked very broadly about what your plate should look like, right? We often are counting calories, and there are many different ways in which our food is sort of served to us or we're told to eat. But one of the simplest and most evidence-based ways of actually thinking about your food and arranging your food is to have a nutritionally balanced plate, which consists of 45% vegetables, 25% protein, 25% carbs, and some healthy fats. All right, so this is what my plate looks like in toto today. Yesterday I was eating rotis, which again, because they were made of millets, I would consider as 50% protein, or perhaps even less, and a little bit more carbs. So that should have been about quarter of my plate, and a little more, because half of the other quarter of my plate was dal, which I was considering 50% protein, 50% carbohydrates. Now, today is going to be literally the most technical that I'm going to get over the 10 days, and really because I will reiterate that there's very little actual solid science that we know about in food and nutrition and nourishment and how the body works. And there's a lot in the realm of things that we're still testing out. Some of the sort of gospel truths that we read about are often studies that have just been conducted with very low number of participants in very limited conditions, and simply don't bear out when we continue them over multiple groups of people, or when we repeat them several times. This is what we call evidence-based. Now, this is where I'd like to talk a little bit before I go into the macros of food, which is what I said we talk about today. I do want to acknowledge that there are several other systems of science, belief, like Ayurveda, and there's several other sort of patterns of eating. Now the thing is, each of them has their own merits, and by all means, a large part of it is what your belief system is and what you're used to, what you feel comfortable with. But I just want to distinguish, without passing any kind of judgment, what the difference between what evidence-based is, right? Which is that evidence-based is pretty much blind. All right, that if I were to do a test and you were to do a test, we both are likely to come up with the same results. We both must come up indeed with same results. Now, we know that there are multiple factors that vary. So when it comes to food, it does get even more complicated, because we don't truly understand the body, we don't fully understand the digestive system, and so many other factors will come into play. Like, if you had to ask yourself, are tomatoes poisonous, as there was a fad a few years ago, because they belong to the family of nightshade, the question would be, even if you or I, both of us, ate a tomato, would we have adverse effects on our body? Now, look at the number of factors that would come into something like this. Is that, where was your tomato grown? Did my tomato have pesticides? What was your body like? What's my body like? Did I eat my tomato in the morning? Did you eat yours at night? There are 100 different complications. I'm just trying to tell you that it's like I said to you yesterday, what's actually in the realm of purely evidence-based information that we have is, one, not very spectacular. It's not changed a lot. We slowly, incrementally get to know more and more about our food. Some of the things that we do seem to know fairly conclusively is that one of the things that does seem to work for weight gain or weight loss, or fat gain or fat loss, is a calorie budget. So the question you need to ask yourself loosely, and this is again a very, very imprecise science, if anybody's telling you that it is mathematical and you got it down to a T, it's unlikely to be very evidence-based. Let me just say that, right? Because not all calories are created equal, how they're processed in the body. Again, you saw the number of variabilities. I don't want to belabor the point. So loosely speaking, if you're in a calorie deficit diet, that means that you're expending more calories than you're consuming. Guess what? Your body is going to burn its own self to fuel your body, because fuel it must, right? And much of our fuel is actually used up during the processes of thinking, circulation, heart beating, breathing. All of these do burn calories as well, but probably not as much as you think that they do. So, which is why sometimes we go for a run in which we might burn 150 calories, and then we come back and eat a burger that's 330 calories. The math of that is that you're likely to be in a calorie surplus, right? Even though you feel like you could eat a horse at the end of it. So it's nice to sort of have a vague idea, but again, very, very imprecise science. You know broadly, bang for buck, the calories that the foods that have the lowest calorie and will fill you up the most are vegetables. Why? Because they contain a lot of moisture, some vegetables upwards of 90% moisture in them, and a lot of insoluble fiber, which adds bulk to your body. It literally can scrape out your inners, all the deposits of sticky foods, fatty foods, sugar-rich foods that stick to your innards. It sort of scours it out. That's about as much cleanse and detox as you need. We'll talk about that another day. And leaves you feeling full, and you have a wide variety, and they need not be boring. So, since I've always promised you, my lunch today consists of a South Indian preparation of brinjal rice. So, that's that here. This is a quinoa, parsley and masoor dal or red lentil salad. I literally had it in an airport once, and it just sounded so good. And like I told you, I literally googled these 3 ingredients, and I was able to find a wonderful recipe for it. This is a vegetable made up of gawar, I think, those long beans that can have quite a bitter aftertaste. The tongue naturally rejects bitter taste because our very primitive brain associated with possibly poisonous foods, but a lot of these foods have since been incorporated into our diet, and we found that they're not poisonous. Nice way to balance out bitter tastes if you don't like them is to club it with something that's a lot more bland. So this definitely has some potato in it. The tomato adds tang, also cuts the bitter, and of course we have like a regular Indian masala of, I'm guessing, chili powder, turmeric, and a tempering. Like I said, I'm not the domestic goddess. What I have here is a little bit more interesting. It is what we call a South Indian more kolambu, or like a tempered yogurt. Now, I mentioned yesterday that I eat primarily vegan, plant-based. So what we have done here is literally created a yogurt from soy milk. And so any recipe, rather than looking for a specific vegan or a specialty sort of diet, think about the foods that you do like, that you do enjoy, and try and make them adapt to the kind of food preferences or the health preferences or the ethical preferences that does suit you. So that goes even for meat eating. If you do want to reduce your meat eating, not give it up altogether, whatever, occasionally you could mindfully enjoy a meat dish, or you could recreate many of those flavors. Keep in mind that your brain is not actually craving the meat. Your brain is craving, one, the umami. Literally, your brain is saying, yes, open invitation to come join me for a meal as well. Your brain is not craving the meat. Your brain is craving partly the umami, which your brain is saying, wow, Sandhya, you found protein today. How do I know it's protein? Because it has that meaty flavor, which we call umami. Well done. I'm going to give you a dopamine hit for that. Reward. I can keep you alive another day because you found protein. Or very often, many of our recipes are associated with our childhood. Oh, Nani ka ghar, in my grandmother's house, she used to prepare meat like this, or this is the specialty dish, the sweet dish that was created in my parents' home. We associate our taste with memory, with familiarity, with comfort, with love, and we will talk about emotional eating as well next week. I promise you that. So this is my lunch for today. Again, I'd invited you to try closing your tabs around in your life, in your head, before you came fully present to your meal. Today, I'd like to take it one step further and actually incorporate a gratitude practice. Okay, we know from behavioral science that it's very easy for us to hyper focus on all the threats in our life. Why? Because your brain is primarily concerned with survival, and anything that is a threat could legit kill you, right? Or at least your brain will register it as that. So it's never going to forget the threat. Very easy for our brain to forget the good things that happen in our life, because they're not essential for our survival. Somebody said something nice to you, you achieved some personal mastery. Yeah, okay, good, that's nice. But you know what? Why don't we focus on what your boss said to you yesterday, because that could mean a job loss, which means you're out of your tribe, which means you're cancelled out, which means you're not and you know how the brain goes. So one of the ways in which we are able to balance this out is by consciously recalling things, by savoring, by showing gratitude for the good things in life. And that's about as much science as like gratitude and stuff does have. It works. So a break in our day, before our rest and digest, is a great time for us to show that little bit of gratitude, right? So what does it have to look like? I'd say you don't have to look very far. If this suits you, go ahead and pick one of the practices that you grew up with, right? Christianity has got the beautiful practice of saying grace. And since I didn't have a vocabulary, I literally started teaching my boys to say grace, and one of my lovely Catholic neighbors gave us the prayer and we were saying it. There are other ways to do it. In Buddhism has an idea of interbeing, right? That everything is connected to everything else. I love that personally, which is to take a look at your plate and really look at the wonder and magic that lies in it. If you're not of any kind of religious leaning or practice, I'll quote Carl Sagan, one of my favorite quotes around food. Carl Sagan, the cosmologist, said that if you want to make an apple pie, you need to invent the universe. Because literally, it's not just the apple. The apple came from an orchard, which needed to be fed by rain, which needed to have soil, which needed to have certain bacteria in it, which needed to have where did those bacteria come from? Where did those soil particles come from? Literally came from a star that would have died out somewhere, and that dust came together, coalesced into this earth. You get the picture, right? That's the magic that exists in our plate every day. How easy it is to forget that when we are so caught up in our everyday grind and in our everyday threats. So a moment to pause and really look at the wonder of this. And depending on how exotic your food is, we do know that it's in most instances it is kinder, it is more ecologically sound to eat local. Not always. Again, depending on your choice, right? If you have a medical health condition that you need to have more of a particular kind of food, I'll say to you, are you going to compromise your health just because you've told yourself you won't eat anything that's not grown outside a 5-mile radius? And indeed, are you going to get the best quality vegetables that grew in 5 miles of my urban jungle, or should I go 30 kilometers outside and perhaps try and draw the line there for most of the foods that I eat? Always, I'd say, rather than going with absolutes, try and really look a little deeper into what might be happening and make your choice as consciously as you can. I did promise to talk about veganism later. I'll tell you about my reasons for it later in the week. So without further ado, let's try a practice which literally, it doesn't even have to be elaborate. One way easiest way to start is bringing bodily awareness, right? So most of the day we're sitting hunched over, our neck is straining, our tummy is sort of collapsed on itself. Just bringing bodily awareness to ourselves tells our brain that, hey, we're here to do something enjoyable. We're here to rest, digest, enjoy our meal. All of that biofeedback is going to go to our brain. A deep breath will tell us that there's no tiger around us, there's no clear and present danger, or we'd never have been able to take that deep breath. Okay, so reset your shoulders, open up your chest, take in the oxygen, and give thanks in the way that you like. If you have a prayer or a position or a mantra or a mudra that you'd like to hold, that's yours. Else, we just take a moment, savoring the food, taking in the sights, the smell of it, giving thanks to the sun, the rain, the farmers, the transporters, all the person that made the food, which certainly wasn't me. Give a moment to give thanks to all of the wonderful forces that brought this meal, and how lucky we are that indeed that we do have this meal in front of us, how blessed we truly are. That said, I'd invite you to start with your meal in complete enjoyment. Even if you're in a hurry, I will say that sometimes when we're doing this practice, we can't all. One of the biggest complaints I get is, I just don't have time. Okay, I'll say to you, set the boundaries. People will respect it. 1. Two, even if you're in a physical rush, you don't need to be mentally rushing, right? Close those tabs, close those distractions, try not to be on your phone, and think about the food that you're eating. The act, today I'm going to eat with a spoon, but sometimes just the tactile act of eating with your fingers can be so powerful. Again, associations with childhood, you're feeling the texture of the food, you're telling yourself what the sensations are, how it feels going down in your body. Technically speaking, biologically speaking, it's going to take a lot longer for your stomach to register fullness. But the very fact that you're aware of what's going on inside happening right now, your brain will already send a signal to you within like, hey Sandhya, I think you've eaten enough, because I know that half an hour later, your stomach's going to have enough for this meal. We will never know that. We have this tendency to finish off everything on our plate, order a pizza, finish the whole pizza, order dessert. How can we waste dessert? All right. And we know that the pleasure quotient of food like this, dessert for example, some of the studies, again, some studies have shown us that simply 3 spoons of dessert will give you all the dopamine that you need. 1.5 slices of pizza or something like that is usually enough to nourish as much as a pizza is going to nourish you, and also give you the sort of all of the opioid and pleasure principles that pizza does give us, all of the associations, all of the marketing that has been done to you, you'll get that. Beyond that, I'll say use the principle from economics, the law of diminishing marginal utility. The remaining 80% of whatever's on your plate, you're just shoveling it in, you're being your own dustbin, and it's not helping any starving children anywhere in the world. So that brings us to the end of today's session. I hope you're enjoying your meal. Thank you for joining me today. I would tell you what we're going to talk about tomorrow, but my laptop seems to have gone to sleep. Oh yes, okay. Tomorrow we're actually going to be talking about food composition. And this will be really interesting because there's so much confusion around what we should be eating, right? And I'll also introduce the concept of koshas, which is not scientific, but I often use metaphors from philosophy to help us, anything that will help us tell a more healthy and interesting story to ourselves. So I look forward to seeing you at 1:35 tomorrow. We'll go through together till 1:50. See you and bon appetit.